Welcome to Journeys with the No Schedule Man, exploring authentic stories of personal growth and lessons learned from people living true to themselves with creativity, passion, and purpose. For all past episodes, subscribe on iTunes or visit noscheduleman.com. And please connect, share, and contribute with a comment, rating, or review. And now, here's your host, the No Schedule Man, Kevin Bulmer.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
The question this week is, how willing are you to go into the storm and then wait? Go into the storm and wait for what you want. Welcome. I'm Kevin Bulmer. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man, helping to create positive change by exploring and sharing authentic conversations on personal and professional growth. You can find all past episodes of this podcast around the world on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and at noschedulemanpodcast.com. If you like what you hear and you'd like to continue the conversation with me on a daily basis, I'd love that, and I invite you to join me in my online community. It's called the Turtle Tribe. Recently, I asked a few of its members to describe what they think it is. And here's what one of them said, quote, "The Turtle Tribe is a place of unrivaled empathetic support, encouragement, guidance, and mentorship to assist in achieving living life on your terms from one of the very best motivational coaches of today, among a group of like-minded, inspirational people also on a journey to live life to the full." Now, if that sounds appealing to you, I hope that you'll consider joining us. Just visit theturtletribe.com. You'll learn everything you need to know, and if you'd like to try out a membership, you can do that for free for 7 days to have a look and see if it's for you. Now, back to where I started. How willing are you to go into the eye of the storm and then wait? Wait for what you want. Well, today's guest, Brian Spencer, has set a great example of how to mix passion and perseverance with patience by living the kind of story that you, quite frankly, don't hear about every day. Known as the Canadian storm chaser, Brian loves to chase tornadoes. And I don't mean metaphorical, emotional storms, though, like anyone else, he's been through his share of those too. No, I mean that once he discovered he held a fascination with the power and ferocity of nature, how it sometimes unleashes that in the form of tornadoes, he was determined to get as close to them as possible. I know you hear that all the time, right? Well, he has done that, and you are going to hear about it today. Brian is also a successful business person, operator of a company called Streaming Incorporated, while also continuing to serve as a creator and curator of a very popular website called PearlJamLive.com. Now, I won't go into too much detail on those things here because Brian does that in the conversation that you're about to hear. Suffice it to say, there seems to me to be a thread of curiosity, passion, connection, challenge, perseverance, and patience that runs through all aspects of Brian's story. And the lesson, I think, is that in order to catch our dreams, we sometimes have to be willing to chase a storm or two. And we've also got to be willing to wait for things to develop, or not, in their own time. Just a few of the key takeaways I took from my conversation with Brian. Number one, perseverance. Now, at one point, when he was describing how he was reaching out to the storm chasing team without hearing anything back for a period of over 4 years, I asked him, "How did you know not to give up?" His answer was, "I don't understand what that means." I don't understand what it means to give up. He shared about a similar scenario in earning the business of one of his current clients for his streaming company, which, as you'll hear him say, took 13 years to finally come together. These are two terrific examples of the perseverance and the patience it takes to finally reach a reward. Things don't always come quickly. Most often, they don't. Number two, awe and respect. Brian's total and complete respect for the power of nature and how he kept using words like beautiful and gorgeous was evident in how he described and felt about nature and something that is inherently violent, and in his case is tornadoes and other severe storms. But you'll hear a genuine sense of awe from Brian, and you will get an idea of the respect that he has for that which he is pursuing and wanting to get close to. And I thought that was a really interesting lesson as well when I took that and I'm looking for the right word, processed it through my own experience to consider what are the things for which I feel a great sense of awe and the things that I have a deep respect for. And what is the deeper connection? What does it bring me closer to? So without getting too existential about it, I think it's interesting how those things that we're attracted to, we pursue them, but they actually bring us back closer to our true selves. Just a thought, I'll leave it at that. Number 3, what I call an alchemy of interests. It always fascinates me how if you dive deeply enough into somebody's story, you can see the common threads even in things that sound as disjointed as, for example, chasing tornadoes, running an online streaming business, and a love of rock and roll music. But as you're going to hear, at least to me, there seems to be an obvious alchemy to all of it as it relates to Brian's journey, just as there must be to yours as well. You're going to love this story. It's a lot of fun. It's like having Indiana Jones as your uncle and he's telling you a bedtime story. This is Brian Spencer, the Canadian storm chaser, on Journeys with the No Schedule Man. Brian, tell me what it's like after having imagined being right up close to a tornado for so long. How did actually being right near one compare with what you had imagined?
Well, interesting question because every tornado is different. They all look different. They all, the experience is just always different. I will tell you, though, like in 2016, we were just southeast of a beautiful EF4 tornado. It was a half a mile wide, and it was only going to the east-southeast at 17 miles an hour. And it was an incredible experience because, number one, it was just outside my van window, but it was traveling so slow that every time we hit the interstate, which was running parallel to the trajectory of the tornado, we kind of had to slow down and allow the tornado to kind of catch up, which is really odd because normally they're motoring at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. But no, it's definitely interesting when you're next to it because, yes, absolutely, you're looking at the tornado itself and just how, beautiful and majestic it is, and of course, and how destructive it can be. But it's the whole experience because you got to remember that also especially when you're next to a very large tornado, this one that I'm speaking of now was an EF4, so it had wind speeds up to 200 miles an hour, that we were so close that the ground actually shakes. There's a bit of a rumble that's kind of happening. And also, if we're kind of southeast or east of the rotation, you can actually hear the hail crashing into each other that's being kind of kept aloft within the storm. So it's got this whole sort of bowling, like constant bowling sound. The ground is shaking, and then hopefully, you have a half decent steady hand to actually video record it at the same time. But no, every tornado is totally different, and every experience is different.
When have you ever felt frightened?
Well, I've had, so over the last few years, I've experienced 26 tornadoes, and 2 of them landed very close to us. They were originally funnel clouds, as they always are. But it's Mother Nature, and she's moody, and she's very unpredictable. And there was one actually in 2011 which would have been kind of my first very close encounter, which was my third tornado in West Memphis Arkansas, where we were basically we were chasing this funnel cloud for like hours, like right across eastern Oklahoma, going into Arkansas, and then we were chasing this rotation right across the entire state of Arkansas until we were just west of Memphis, Tennessee, and we could actually see. This was back in 2011 when the Discovery Channel was still recording the TV show Storm Chasers, and so we could actually see some of the stars from the TV show on the side of the road. They were chasing the same funnel cloud as us, and there was a moment there where everybody kind of stopped and they were pointing at the sky. And I remember saying to our driver, John, super great guy, I'm like, hey John, we should pull over. Tim Samaras and them are all kind of looking up, and maybe it's time it's going to start doing its magic. And sure enough, we did pull over, and the video is unbelievable because the rotation was actually coming right towards us, and I'm in the back seat of the van on the passenger side, and I'm actually hanging out of the vehicle filming the funnel cloud straight up as it was above me. And needless to say, it finally dropped down. Finally dropped right beside us, and we were on the interstate, and on either side actually of the interstate was flooded farmers' fields. And so once it touched down, it started rotating right beside the truck and started picking up all this water and throwing it into our truck and all over our camera equipment and stuff. And of course, my thought is, holy, my camera's getting, I'm worried about my equipment, not actually worried about the tornado that just touched down. And the video is a little on the humorous side because the window, I pulled the window up, and then the guy beside me, he says, he starts using all sorts of 4-letter words, telling me to roll down the window because he wanted to get shots of it. And I couldn't believe the footage after because I'm like, man, I'll never. Not that I thought at that time, but I'd never be, closer than a football field to a tornado. And again, which of course was wrong because it happened again in 2016. But yeah, very unpredictable. There was certainly a fear factor there. But for whatever reason, I was more concentrating on protecting my equipment and trying to land that perfect video shot. And it was just a small little EF0, so it wasn't too bad at all. But that was my first induction into the fear of severe weather.
You partially answered what was going to be my next question by saying that I never thought I was going to be closer than a football field. To follow up, you had said that that the tornado dropped down right beside you, and I just wondered if you could give a little bit more context to what right beside you means.
Well, so basically, as I'm filming the funnel cloud, and this is the one in 2011, West Memphis, Arkansas. I'm filming the funnel cloud, and the video footage is actually quite remarkable because I've never filmed a funnel cloud right under it. So I'm really focusing on that and trying to get some half decent focus on the video, and then all of a sudden, it just dropped right beside us, and you could see it rotating from left and right. Left to right. It was picking up all this water, and it was throwing it in our truck, and it was a bit of a touch and go kind of moment. And then once the tornado kind of passed us, it was right in front of our truck, and we were going to start losing it. So we had to kind of bolt east to do our best to stay in front of it. But really, it was only on the ground for maybe a minute or two, but that was a minute or two, which was long enough for me. It was a bit frightful, and every time I watch the video now, I can still feel that moment so clear. But very fearful and very sobering at the same time.
What's the primary objective of trying to get so close to these storms?
Well, so now I'm actually a driver, a lead driver for the oldest running tornado tour group based out of Oklahoma, and so my priorities have now changed. Obviously, safety is paramount. So every day we go out, we have tripods that are kind of mounted to our dashboard and stuff, so we don't actually have to hold any equipment, which is great. So we can keep two hands on the wheel all the time, eyes on the road, and I'm not really. My second priority is obviously to film the tornado because I'm a videographer by trade. But in the early days when I was kind of chasing by myself, it was basically trying to get the left edge and the right edge of the tornado within the viewfinder, and hopefully it's within good focus. And so that was my number one goal when I first started out, was just trying to acquire the best tornado footage out there. And now that I've been picked up by this company, obviously my focus has changed a little bit, but I still do try to acquire some of the best footage out there.
This might sound like a silly question, Brian, but it's in between my ears, so I'll ask it. Trying to acquire the best footage of the tornado possible. Why?
Yeah.
Like, for what purpose?
Well, just to what's amazing about tornadoes is that they are huge. And so if you are within like a mile away from the tornado, you might not actually be able to get the entire tornado, meaning the touchdown on the Earth's surface and the lowering of the storm base of the cloud. You might not be able to get the whole thing within a shot. And that's always kind of my focus. I want to get the top of the tornado where you can actually see the rotating mesocyclone or the bottom of the storm cell, the supercell, and I want to get the contact with the ground. So I need to get all four of those elements, the bottom, the top, the left edge, and the right edge of the tornado. And that is always my objective. I want to capture this as clean as possible, really just for momentum, or just to remember years ahead. And also when I feed that footage to the Weather Network or CTV News or whatever, they want to see that footage too. They want to see the structure and the speed of the rotation, of course, the width of the tube itself. I'm not really too interested in getting like super close and worrying about wearing adult diapers and whatnot. I want to stay about a mile or 2 miles away because these things are so huge that I want to film everything. I want to get the structure, the rotation, and of course the tube within the shot. It's not really a successful capture unless I can get that.
How do you imagine that having that kind of footage helps people like the Weather Network, who you mentioned?
How does it help them? I'm not entirely sure if it helps them at all, except for their own ratings. But people, when they view, severe, content on the Weather Network or whatever, is that, you can look at the radar all you want and you can see where the rotation is or whatever, but it's just a part of the entire story. You need to have the forecasting, you need to have the radar imagery, the weather models, and of course, to finish the story, hopefully you got a shot of the actual tornado, and hopefully you don't acquire any shots of tornadoes running over farmsteads and whatnot. I don't know if it actually helps to tell the story, but I know for me, I love revisiting the footage, and you got to remember, as a professional storm chaser, there's many things we're trying to accomplish out there. It's not just for me, it's not just the capturing of the tornado, but we are encouraged to participate in calling in these reports in the National Weather Service, and in the hopes of helping with the warning process as best as possible. Because when you talk with any meteorologist, they'll all say the same thing. They can forecast where the severe weather is going to be. They can see the rotation on radar and so on and so forth, but they don't know if there's an actual tornado on the ground. And so a lot of people are connected with the National Weather Service, whatnot. National Weather Service will actually call us if we're in the field, and they can actually see us because of our GPS and say, "Oh, hey, there's Brian Spencer. He looks really close to this rotation. Let's give him a call and let's see if we can get a confirmation of touchdown." So there's many elements that we're trying to achieve while we're out there, on top of trying to capture, for myself anyways, trying to capture the perfect tornado on video.
Yeah, the National Weather Service or some similar organization is probably a much better example than the one I used with the Weather Network. I guess I'm assuming, Brian, that it can't possibly hurt an organization like that to have access to the kind of view that you just described of the bottom, the top, the left, and the right edge, to not just see something from a distance or on a radar or something like that, but to actually be able to put their eyes on some version through video of of how that actually manifests, so that they can learn as much as they can about that going forward. Measuring that within the context that you described, I think, right, of the larger data of how it develops and then what happens immediately afterwards. I'm guessing that probably helps them understand just a little bit more and a little bit more each time.
It does. And what the meteorologists, especially down Oklahoma and northern Texas and Kansas, is that depending on where the location of the Doppler radar, these meteorologists will actually get different images because basically the farther your supercell is away from a Doppler radar, the beam that Doppler radar shoots out, it's basically measuring higher and higher up in the atmosphere. And so the closer the Doppler radar is to the rotating supercell, the better image is going to come through. So basically, if we're 50 miles away or 100 miles away from a Doppler radar, that Doppler radar is sending out a beam at 0.5 degrees. Well, you're 100, 200 miles away. It's measuring the rotation within the mid levels or maybe even the upper levels. Not in the lower levels where all the destruction is happening. So a lot of the meteorologists, and as I said, the National Weather Service folks, they'll actually call us and say, hey, you know what, we can see the rotation on radar, but our Doppler radar is 100 miles away. So that basically the rotation that they're seeing could actually be like 25 or 40 miles away from where the actual tornado is. So it just helps with them saying, okay, you know what, we can see the rotation, but our Doppler radar is kind of far away. We're going to call them out and say, hey, where exactly is this touchdown? And because the majority of the touchdowns, when the tornadoes touch down, the majority of them are going to go into an east-northeast trajectory, and they're going to want to warn those small towns east of that rotating supercell as best as possible. So it could be off, 25, 30, 40 miles off. And so that resource for them to call us to get an actual placement of the rotating tornado is paramount, is absolutely essential.
Let's go back in time a little bit. We jumped right into the middle of the fray, and thank you for doing that. But if I'm listening now, I have the benefit of knowing a little bit of your story, Brian. But if I'm listening here, I'm thinking, what in the world possesses somebody to want to do like that? And how does the guy from Ontario, Canada, wind up in Arkansas and some of those other Midwestern states chasing these powerful storms around? So let's go back in time. And what do you remember about the first time that you were aware that you were really kind of fascinated and curious about this sort of stuff?
Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to go back about 10 or so years ago. And even when I was a kid and going into my early years of adulthood, I've always been a hobbyist. I have always been busy doing something outside of my 9. So in the early days, when I first started, putting forth some of my hobby passions, if you will, I'm actually a huge music fan, and I was a lot of my time was actually taken up launching and maintaining this website that was a fan-based website for one of my favorite bands called Pearl Jam. And so long story short, I started learning, kind of how to do the whole streaming thing or whatever. And then I launched this website where I was streaming their live concerts. And this all started back in the year 2000. And long story short, the website got quite big and quite busy. And soon after that, within 6-9 months after that, I actually became friends with the band. And that's a whole nother story. It's a whole nother conversation. But basically, it was a wonderful existence because every show that I was able to go to, I was able to obtain, an after show pass and, hang out with the guys or whatever and get some autograph posters. And it was so wonderful. It was a win-win situation. But in 2003, 2004, when Pearl Jam became an indie band, they basically said, they went out there and said, okay, we need to obtain these domain names because we want to use them for our own, marketing and PR purposes. And long story short, I was served with papers from their lawyers basically accusing me of making money off of their trademark and all this total BS. And it just really irritated me because I was making zero money doing this, and I thought it was a wonderful synergy between us. But anyways, long story short, they tried to take my domain name away that I had for 4 or 5 years before that, and basically I fought it, and it's a whole long story. But after it's all said and done, I won the case because I was doing absolutely nothing wrong. But after it was all said and done, I was allowed to keep the domain name, but my view and my taste for music and the band or whatever, of course, it left a bad taste in my mouth. And so my interest for that kind of dissipated. And a year later or whatever, I was flipping channels. I think it was 2006, 2007. I was flipping channels, and it was this program that came on TV. It was called Angry Planet. And it was this guy he was hosted by this Canadian, actually out of Toronto. His name is George Karunas, and he was going to go down to the Florida Keys and chase water spouts. And I've always been kind of interested in nature and just being outside in general. And so I started watching this program because I had no idea what a water spout was. And at the end of the program, the half hour, an hour program, he was able to he chased a bunch of water spouts. He was able to capture a few on video. And after watching the footage, I just thought to myself, man, these are like the most beautiful things I have ever seen. They are so gorgeous. And I had no idea that they exist. And after some research or whatnot, I learned that actually our Great Lakes will spawn about 400 of these water spouts per year, which is really fantastic. And then about 6 months or a year later or whatever, Discovery Channel launched the TV program Storm Chasers, and then of course I dove into that 2 feet, and I've been utterly amazed by tornadoes ever since. So that's kind of how it all started, just being a general hobbyist, and then doing my passions, if you will, out there. And when one kind of dissipated, I needed to kind of fill that void with another thing, and that's kind of how I got into it.
It sounds like your interest in video precedes any of what you just described.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I've always been into multimedia, even when I was a kid, or even in the 90s. Growing up here in London, Ontario, I used to be in a lot of bands, and it's always been just a ton of fun. And music's always been a good cornerstone for in my entire life. And many years ago, about 18, I think it was 17, 18 years ago, I was actually working at 3M here in London, Ontario. And with my multimedia background and my good grasp of streaming technology, which was totally different then than it is now. But I was working at 3M, and basically I was invited to a quarterly report at 3M, and I didn't know really what I was to experience. But I went to this meeting, and basically the president of the company, his name was Mr. Mark Borseth, he was giving a keynote presentation. Which he did every 3 months. And there he was standing at a podium, and then there was these slides that were on this screen, and they were kind of synchronized with his talk. And I'm like, hey, this is a really cool environment. But I noticed that they were filming the keynote presentation. And so after the event was done or whatever, I went to go talk to the person that was in charge of video capturing, and his name was Pat Small, super great guy. And I'm like, hey, Pat, what do you do with the footage after? And he had no answer. He said, well, basically, we're a publicly traded company. We have to film this sort of correspondence or whatever. And I said, well, what about if we made these presentations available online using today's cutting edge streaming technology, which was total far cry from what it is today. But he goes, well, we don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, here, let me give me a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and the video. Let me see if I can put something together. And so just a few days later, I had an online version of his exact keynote presentation. And then I was in the president's office showing him his video, which was synchronized with the slides and stuff. And he was totally blown away. And he stood up and he looked at me and then the PR guy. And he says, why are we not doing this? And I thought to myself, oh, this might be good for me. And so that's when I really got into the streaming media. And I soon left at 3M and then launched my own company, Streaming Incorporated, to basically offer that exact service to medium and large size companies to video capture their keynote presentations, like town hall meetings, annual general meetings, whatever it is, and not just capture it and make it available after the event, but stream it live through the internet. And I launched my company, Streaming Incorporated, about 15 years ago, which has allowed me, obviously, some flexibility within my schedule to further chase my passions, if you will, which obviously had a lot to do with music. And now it's all about storm chasing.
I want to stop and ask anyone who's listening to consider some context here. And then I'm going to follow up with the questions again, Brian.
Yeah.
First of all, let me make sure that I heard you correctly. When you were describing the chapter in your life when you were streaming live concerts of Pearl Jam, I think I heard you say that was in and around 2000 that started. Is that correct?
Yep, probably 2000 to 2004.
Okay, so we're recording this in 2018. There's some massive difference in what was going on. Like, my first recollection of being on the internet was in and around 1995, 94, 95-ish, I think.
Yeah. Good for you.
And I'm trying to remember about when I first became aware of YouTube, and for some reason, I'm feeling like it was 2004, 2005-ish. Does that sound...
Yep. You're 100% correct. My company is actually older than YouTube.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say that we were worth the same amount of money, but that would be a lie. And it's actually been interesting with the whole transition with YouTube, because YouTube was a wonderful platform for anybody to upload any sort of content and make that available to anybody. And now it's actually changed. And actually this has a storm chasing or a tornado video sort of twist to it too. But what's been interesting in the streaming market is when I first launched PearlJamLive.com, that I was actually streaming their concert using real audio. And so we all remember Real Audio because they were really the pioneers of online streaming back in the day. And of course, and over the years, it changed into Windows Media, and then we got into Flash, and now it's just streaming straight MP3s. It's quite wonderful. So yeah, the technology has certainly changed. So yeah, my company is just slightly older than YouTube. But just getting back to the storm chasing aspect, there's a ton of great storm chasers out there that have fantastic footage. So you can go to YouTube and you can look at basically any tornado that's happened in the last 15, 20 years for free on YouTube. But actually YouTube, just in the last I want to say 4 to 5 years, since probably mid 2013, that they've actually changed a little bit. Obviously, we're inundated with advertisements now with YouTube, but actually, a lot of storm chasers would be out there filming these tornadoes and getting far too close, because all they wanted to do was get that footage on YouTube and acquire as many views or as many hits as possible. And as you probably well know, there was a few storm chasers that were run over by tornadoes but because they were just trying to acquire this incredible footage, which is obviously quite stupid. But so YouTube actually went out there and said, listen, we're not going to give you any more money now, because after I don't know how many hits you get, a certain amount of dollars or whatever, and they basically said, you know what, no, we're not moving forward with this business practice. We will not be sending you any money for your tornado videos. We do not want you to be out there, obviously, in harm's way and putting your life in jeopardy trying to capture this footage, and for what? To get hits on YouTube. So that has definitely changed. YouTube has been a very interesting evolution over the years. But yeah, my company is older than YouTube, and I remember the oldest of technologies, which is Real Audio. And now with the beautiful, you can now live stream through any content through any phone. It works on any device now. It's been quite wonderful.
Yeah, well, see, I'm trying to give you credit because I guess what I was getting at a few minutes ago, Brian, was my favorite band always will be a group called Extreme. And they hadn't been active for a long time. And I remember somebody posting a video on something that I'd never heard of called YouTube. And I think it was around 2004, 2005. But they had done a show, the first in a long, long time, in Japan, which I obviously was never going to get to see. Right. And there was maybe one song from that show that was posted on this thing online. And I remember the experience of thinking, what? I can actually see it. And I remember clicking on it and waiting for, and this was like a 3.5, 4 minute video file, and I'm waiting for it to load, and I'm waiting for it to load, and this is before DSL, broadband, all that kind of stuff. So, and this is probably a half decade after you've already been live streaming Real Audio of these if anything, you were way ahead of your time.
Yeah, and you know what? Even after 15 years of running my streaming company, and I don't know if our hometown London is still kind of way behind the times here, but I still find it a lot of times, probably the majority of times, like 70, maybe even 80%, I don't know, that I still feel it's a hard sell here in London. We're very slow to accept. It's not even a new technology anymore. It's been around for so long, and it's amazing. Actually, one of my biggest clients right now is London Life. I do all of their live streaming. London Life, Great West Life, Canada Life. I got so many great friends over there. We've done a ton of live streaming. It's so much fun. But it actually took me about 13 years to finally get my first gig in there. And they basically just kept saying, no, it's the internet, it's unsafe, it's all this stuff. And so basically back in the day, what they would do is if they had an executive vice president or even the president himself who wanted to deliver some sort of, quarterly keynote, that president would actually, say if his office was in Winnipeg, he would deliver the keynote in Winnipeg, and then he would fly to Toronto and then give that keynote again, and then drive down to London and give that keynote again. So then he'd be gone from his office for like 4 or 5 days. And I'm like, well, why don't you just send me to Winnipeg? We'll live stream it to the entire company, and then he's only missing an hour away from his desk as opposed to 4 days. And even that sell alone was very difficult. Yeah. It's amazing because online communication, as you well know, Kevin, it is so vital. And the cost difference between, sending people to an actual event and paying for their meals and accommodations and all that, as opposed to just reaching out to an online communications company and saying, you know what, we're only going to invite, 100 of our senior staff and not 1,000 of them. Let's just live stream it out to them. Why don't we save ourselves $150,000, $200,000, and pay Streaming Inc. $3,500 to do it? You know what I mean? It's an incredible money-saving, wonderful technology and I know through our company that we stream through a very basic platform that works on all devices, whether you're on the iPhone or the Android, even the dated Blackberries or any of the updated web browsers. Our content works on everything, and no app required, and there's no advertising whatsoever that YouTube is trying to stuff down your throat. It's all client controlled. And I've definitely been ahead of the curve even before I started the company. But even 15 years after launching the company, I still find it very difficult for the older established companies to start realizing the incredible benefits that online communication offers.
There seem to be some trends emerging in your story, if I may make an observation and try to help the listener understand. What the heck, you guys? You started off, you had the guy beside a tornado, then he's streaming concerts, and now he's working with... I'm hearing that you seem to have a natural inclination for being right on the cutting edge of the things that feed your curiosity. You seem to have a real inherent belief in yourself when you know that you see something that you like and believe in. There's a belief there. And what I'd really like to explore next, if you'll indulge me, Brian, is... a really natural perseverance. So, for example, you just gave another example of one of the clients that you said it took 13 years to get that first gig. And when I heard you say that, I thought, there's something that's congruent with the path of getting into the storm chasing. So if I can rewind in your story a little bit further back to where you were seeing storm chasers on the Discovery Channel, you saw the guy chasing water spouts on Angry Planet, and you thought, that's something that I'd like to participate in at some level. Can you unpack that a little bit and share the story, the perseverance it took to have that idea and then actually get yourself there? What was that like?
That's a fantastic question. And you know what? I'm probably going to say something here that's going to kind of blow your mind a little bit. But when I was so back in 2011, I went through this 2009, 2010, I was going through this wonderful divorce, and then in 2011, I said, you know what does Brian want to do? You know what I mean? I'm getting kind of tired of, just trying to do things for everyone else. I'm like, who am I? What do I want to do? And of course, at that time, I had a few dollars in the bank, and I said, you know what? I need, we're getting older. The bucket list seems to be increasing. And then basically I'm like, you know what, this is the year I have to go down to the States. I've seen every single tornado video out there. I've watched all the documentaries. I've read all the books. Of course, I've become Facebook friends with a ton of exceptional storm chasers out there. So 2011 came and I'm like, I got to go. I'm going to go down there. And so I was basically researching tornado tour groups. And it just so happened that the one that I was eyeing up, it was called Cloud9 Tours, and for a couple of reasons. Number one reason, it was actually the oldest established tornado tour group out there. I'm like, hey, that's great. They were approaching their 18th or 19th season by then, which is so fantastic. And then I also researched that the lead driver of that tornado tour group, because they basically have three vehicles within their caravan. But the lead driver was Mr. George Karunis, who was the host of that initial show, Angry Planet, and a fellow Canadian. So it was a bit of a no-brainer for me. I'm like, well, I'm going to sign up with Cloud9 Tours. I already know who this George guy is, and I already love the reputation for this particular company. And so that's what I did. In 2011, I went down there, and I finally met George in person, and, big handshake, big hugs as us Canadians do. And we just had an incredible 2 weeks. But I fell in love with the passion even more. It wasn't just the tornadoes, but it was the 3 or the 4 inch hail. It was the huge hail, and then the huge lightning, but it was also the technology, and it was also meeting these like-minded individuals from all corners of the world that were all meeting in central Oklahoma at the same time, and we're experiencing the finger of God collectively. And so it was a wonderful, incredible couple of weeks. But what happened is when I got home is I missed it so very much. And I miss being in America. And I miss, seeing the snakes and the tarantulas and the cactus and the tumbleweed and, of course, the beautiful storms. And so I sent an email to the owner of the company. His name's Charles Edwards. Beautiful human being. I call him my tornado whisperer, because he can actually stand outside the van and he can just look at the clouds and he can tell you exactly what's going to happen. I can't. I still lack that experience, and I need the aid of technology to help me with that. Having said all that, though, when I came back in 2011, I sent him an email. I'm like, hey, Charles, listen. I loved my 2 weeks. I loved everything that I learned about it. And if you ever need a driver and guide, I'm your man. I'm your man. Just throw me in, coach. Just give me a chance. I'm your guy. And so that was 2011. So sure enough, I heard nothing back. And in 2012, I'm down in the States and chasing some stuff. And of course, I bump into a couple of times. I give him a couple of pokes, and I get back and I send him another email in 2012. Charles, listen, if you ever need a driver and guide, please give me a chance. Throw me in, coach. I can do this. So I heard nothing in 2012. I heard nothing in 2013. I heard nothing back in 2014. And I'm still sending emails, and I heard nothing in 2015. And finally, in 2016, I actually got an email from him. And it basically said, hey, listen, George Karunis, our lead driver, is moving on to the Weather Network. We need a driver. Are you sure you're up for it? And I'm like, oh, my goodness, this is an unbelievable opportunity. Yes, put me in, coach. And so I was the lead driver for a 2-week tour. So basically he has 3 consecutive 2-week tours, and so he needed an additional driver for the middle tour number 2, which is kind of the one you want to go with, because that's where the tornado season is at its absolute peak when you're in Oklahoma and Kansas, Nebraska area. And so I drove down there, and I had this stupid, goofy looking face, smile on my face driving down there. I'm like, this is an absolute dream come true. Drove for him for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, we captured 18 tornadoes. And then I said to Charles, I'm like, Charles, how successful was this 2 weeks compared to all the other tours that you've been doing the last, 18, 19, 20 years, whatever. He says, Brian, this was the absolute most, incredible, mind-blowing 2 weeks, successful 2 weeks we've ever experienced here at Cloud9 Tours. And I said to him, listen, here, you SOB, you should have called me 6 years ago, because I could have brought this good vibe. I could have brought, and so of course we had a stupid laugh over it. But then I got the call the next year in 2017, last season, and I drove for him for 2 consecutive tours, so for 4 weeks. And then this year, after some tweaking of the website, some social media, we're completely sold out. Well, we're almost completely sold out. I think there's a couple seats left, and I'm lucky enough to be driving for the entire season season for all 6 weeks. So this year I'm happier than absolutely anything. But it all started by flipping channels one day, reading a description of the program, watching, Angry Planet and learning about water spouts, and then it just progressed from there.
From 2011 through to 2016, when you finally got that email, you said 2012 you heard nothing, 13 nothing, 14 nothing, 15 nothing. How did you know not to give up on it?
I don't give up. I don't understand what that means. It's you need to figure out what you like to do. You need to figure out you need to obviously put a little effort in that and some research or whatever. But I'm always 110% kind of guy. No matter what I'm ever doing, whether it's through streaming and I do have a couple of other companies or storm chasing or you're coaching ball hockey or high school football. We as adults we have our hands in many pots, and I'm always one to put 110% in because it was a dream. And I'm like, I would love the opportunity to hang out with people, to talk about tornadoes, and especially with the different guests that we get through the tornado group, because some of them are new. And then some of them, have been there like every couple of years for a bunch of years. So, there's some people that we can actually experience their first tornado with them. It's almost like, having kids and they're opening presents at Christmas for the first time. It's the exact same experience. Or, you get to hang out with people that have been back, tour after tour, and you're like, oh, you remember that, EF4 tornado in 2016. And it's just such a wonderful experience, and it's way better than I thought it was going to be. So it's an utter dream come true, and I have no idea what giving up means.
Given that you're so enthusiastic about it, I'm trying to figure out how I want to ask this, but here's what I'm getting at. You're going to be there a full 6 weeks this year.
Correct.
I guess what I'm looking at is how have you managed to not want to do that more?
Well, it's the problem is tornado season normally starts at the beginning of May, and then like the peak of the season, and it runs till about mid-June. And basically what we're doing, like this time of year right now, we're waiting for the southerly winds right now to pull that warm, moist air off the Gulf of Mexico. And basically the southerly winds will bring that up northbound, and with that moisture, it'll start colliding with the dry, cool air that's subsiding off the foothills of the Rockies, and that's where you get a lot of dry line storm chasing kind of happening. So we need those ingredients to come together for these extreme weather conditions to happen. But as the year progresses, there's not too many outbreaks or too many tornadoes that will kind of happen, after, like in late June. But and the reason being is because of the tilt of the earth and where the jet stream normally lies, is that we will actually get a lot more tornadoes in the northern states and even in eastern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and western Manitoba, because now once we get into late June and July, that jet stream is far more north. And we'll actually a lot of years we'll actually experience more tornadoes here in Canada than in the US in the month of July. But I'm not going to travel out to the west, to chase, storms that might erupt every week or every couple of weeks. So I think, I'll get my 4 weeks in, or 6 weeks in within Tornado Alley, and then I'll wait till those storms come to me in, June, July, and August, when that instability in the atmosphere finds its way here in Southwestern Ontario, and I can, do some minor chasing then. So no, it's not over, after the 4 or 6 weeks. There's still plenty of weather to check out. You can still get out there. You can still get your vehicle struck by lightning. You can still enjoying half-inch or 1-inch hail here in Southwestern Ontario. You can still see some fantastic structure and some shelf clouds, and there's a ton of other things to see outside the tornado. But we do get tornadoes here in Southwestern Ontario in July and into August, and sometimes into September. The problem is that there's a heavy population here in Southwestern Ontario. There's too many red lights, too many stop signs, too many tall trees, and too many people, meaning that you can't actually see the tornado until it's on top of you. And our tornadoes that actually touch down here in Southwestern Ontario might only be on the ground for a minute or two, or maybe 3 minutes. When you're down in the States, you have such extreme conditions coming together that once a tornado drops a confirmed touchdown, it might be on the ground for 5 minutes up to an hour and a half. So your success rate is much higher when you're down in the States than compared to here in Southwestern Ontario.
You described the storms before as beautiful.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about your view on that, of something that can be so destructive and cause so much pain and havoc in people's lives.
Yeah.
But that's not they're just, it's a natural phenomenon. What is it that you see that makes you describe it and feel of it, or feel about it as beautiful?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing when you're standing next to a tornado, because you're looking at it and the ground is shaking and it's ripping, cedar trees out of the ground and it's throwing them aloft but it's the entire process is beautiful for me. Like even like the night before, when I'll do like a quick pseudo forecasting and basically pick a somewhat of a target location for the next day. And then once I wake up in the next morning, the latest weather models will come out and I get to pour over all of this data and try to figure out where that moisture is, where that instability is, and trying to figure out that in the initial target area, and then so on and so forth. And then eventually we get into our trucks and then we drive for 2 to 5 to 7 hours to get into the initial target area. And then by that time we have the cumulus nimbus clouds are all starting to fire up, whether it's along the dry line or wherever the instability is. And now you're hopefully maybe 50 miles or 100 miles east of this maturing supercell, and you can actually see it coming towards you, and it's getting bigger and it's getting bigger. And these thunderstorms or these supercells are reaching heights in the atmosphere, are hitting 45, 50, 60, even 70,000 feet up in the air, like so high, so huge that airplanes have to fly around them, or they will lose their windows. They'll lose the nose of the airplane. They might lose a wing. Like these storms are incredibly huge. And so when you're standing next to it and you're like, wow, this is amazing, because you're only looking at the bottom, half a mile. Right. But you got to remember that storm system is actually reaching altitude of, 60, 65,000 feet up in the air or whatever it is. And you're like, wow, we're only looking at the bottom half mile. And you're just standing there and you're looking at the rotation. You're looking at the top of the anvil cloud. You might be looking at the overshooting top. And there's so many things that happen during the day that finally, once that tornado touches the ground, now you're next to the absolute finger of God. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I can't believe my eyes. I can't believe I'm experiencing this. This thing is just so gorgeous. And hopefully it's in the middle of absolutely nowhere. But at the same time, if you're in a mile or 2 miles away from this tornado, and you're feeling the ground shake and just north of you or northeast of you that it's dropping 4-inch hail, and you're just in absolute awe of the beauty and the majesty of the storm and the tornado. But at the same time, the pendulum will swing the absolute extreme other direction, saying, oh my goodness, you get an EF3 tornado or an EF4 tornado. These are wind speeds of 150 to 200 miles an hour. Like, you can look at in how destructive the EF3 tornado was that went through Godrich. Like that was an incredible, it's like, wow, it's just unbelievable. So from my standpoint, yes, absolutely is totally beautiful. Obviously the majority of the tornadoes, confirmed tornadoes that are experienced in the U.S., which is well over 1,000 every single year. And as we know, the majority of them, 95% of them will happen in rural areas in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And hopefully they're kind of stationary, so you can just take it in for minutes, if not, an hour or two. And it's unbelievable being so close to something so beautiful, so majestic, and something that could take you out in a moment's notice. And hopefully we can still stay a mile or 2 miles away, that none of that will actually ever happen to us.
Two words that are coming to mind listening to you describe your feelings and experience are awe and
For sure.
and respect. How fair are those?
Oh, respect was actually the first lesson that I probably learned because my first day in Tornado Alley, now you got to remember, this was in 2011. This is May 22nd or 21st of 2011. And, I saved up all this money. I made a decision that I was going to go down there. And my first day, I landed at Will Rogers Airport in Oklahoma City. And one of these armored vehicles picked me up. And I'm like, I can't believe this. I'm being picked up by a bulletproof vehicle, and now we're going to go and join the rest of our caravan. I'm actually here in Tornado Alley. This is an utter dream come true. And then the next day, my first tornado experience was the EF5 tornado that went through Joplin, Missouri, in 2011. And this was an unbelievable experience. We were about a minute and a half or 2 minutes behind the tornado. We were going northbound, and we could actually see just barely the left edge of the tornado as it crossed the interstate. And it actually, it hoisted a lot of 53-foot trucks, 53-foot like big Mack tractor trailers off the interstate. And it pulled it towards the storm. So there, all of these huge trucks were in the ditches and over in the grassy area. And you're looking at the mangled street signs that were basically being wrapped around light posts and telephone posts and stuff. And like, oh my goodness, what is going on? And then of course you hear about the death and destruction of what that single tornado did in Joplin, Missouri. And then we have our first aid, we have our CPR. We actually had a couple of we had a medic with us, we had an ER nurse with us, where we'll get out of our vehicles once it's safe. We'll get out of our vehicles, and we went to these tipped over capsized trucks and basically knocking on their windshields and trying to get these people up and saying, hey, are you hurt? Do you need to go to the hospital? And we actually grabbed a couple of people. We had to bring them into Joplin, Missouri to get them to the hospital. But of course, the tornado had passed right through town. It ran over one of the two hospitals where it completely destroyed it. And then once the tornado ran over the second hospital, that it picked up the entire hospital and it moved it off of its foundation by like 7 or 8 inches. And once we got into town, we're trying to bring these people who got blood running down their face, and you can tell they got lacerations, if not cuts off their foreheads and stuff. You're like, oh my goodness, this was day one for me. This was an absolute sobering moment where it's utter respect. It's utter love and respect for Mother Nature. She is moody, and she will do what she wants to do. And hopefully we can just have some sort of small part within the warning process of trying to help, the people that might be affected somehow. So absolutely, that was my first ever lesson that I learned, was utter respect for the power of Mother Nature.
Something else I was thinking about listening to you, through the whole conversation, but as you've shared different chapters of this story, Brian, I wrote down human experience and connection. And you just furthered that with what you just described of trying to help other people and trying to contribute in a way that you can and having respect for what these things can do, but taking this interest and awe that you have and trying to share it in a way that can be helpful, but also through streaming, through bringing the music that you loved for a time to other people that also loved it, to connecting businesses to their associates that may be in completely different geographies through your streaming incorporated company. There's a thread of connection that runs through everything that you're doing. Do you see that too?
Yeah, well, actually, I might have one better for you. A couple of 3 years ago, I was, down in the States, and of course, with the advent of Facebook, like we really connect with our storm chasing friends quite well and quite regularly. But I noticed a couple 3 years ago, maybe even more now, maybe even 5 years ago, that I noticed a few storm chasers who are fantastic photographers, that they were coming out with their own calendars. I'm like, oh, this is pretty interesting. So you're actually out there, you're snapping these fantastic, incredible shots. Like I have so much respect for photographers. This is one skill I'm utterly terrible at. And I'm looking at these pictures and I'm like, and I got interested in maybe buying a calendar or two. And with my business focused brain, if you will, I thought to myself that, I'm starting to kind of materialize, some sort of business plan for these photographers. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many copies they actually sell. Would they sell, 5 to their mom, of course, and maybe if their brothers or sisters actually like them, they might buy one, or they might give them to their kids. Or I'm like, wonder how many they would sell, like maybe 20 or 25. So I came up with this idea. It's a few years ago. I can't remember actually when I purchased it, but I purchased a domain called tornadocalendar.com. It was available. It cost me $12 or whatever. And I kind of sat on it for a couple of years. And as I do with things, I like to think about things and trying to execute it as seamless as possible with the focus on, people helping people. Just something as simple as that. And so what I did is I finally not got up the courage, but I finally found a little bit of time. I'm like, well, why don't we pursue a different, another business where I'm going to reach out to all of these incredible photographers and say, hey, listen there, Kevin, I noticed that you're a fantastic photographer. You got some great shots of tornadoes. What about, did you take any fantastic shots from the previous season? And let's put like the top 12 shots from the top 12 photographers from that particular season, and let's put all of those incredible photos in one calendar. So then we have 12 different chasers, 12 different photos, one for each month, obviously. And then so then we basically every year we form a 13-person business where we're out there, selling our paper calendars, which aren't a huge thing anymore. I just want to throw that out there because it has not been a success. But anyways, the response was so wonderful and so positive. Like, yeah, this is great. We are a collective. We do help each other. We are always looking out for each other, sort of thing. And so I launched Tornado Calendar in 2016. And then so the first calendar was the 2017 calendar and then the 2018 calendar. And we didn't sell very many, I will tell you that. It's not paper calendars. They have gone the way of the dodo, if you will. So it'll be interesting to see the evolution of the calendar. But yeah, I think it's a Canadian way, or maybe it's just the human way or whatever. But I like a win-win situation. And if we can, and especially with these 12 photographers who are all way better than me, like if you purchase any of the tornado calendars for the last 2 years, you'll notice there's no pictures of that I've taken whatsoever because mine suck. But the photos, and you can see them on the website at tornadocalendar.com. But you can see the photos. You're like, oh my goodness, these are incredible. So it was a wonderful, people helping people, or a win-win situation. And it's other than it's a project that makes me absolutely no money whatsoever because of the overhead and even just purchasing the boxes and all this other neat stuff, but it's been a wonderful avenue for me to get to know the best storm photographers out there, and we are family. When we're out there, we're under a rotating supercell, and I might be just kind of chit chat with somebody. I'm like, hey, didn't you submit a photo to the calendar? And so I have met the best storm photographers out there, and although I'm not making any money from the experience, I will never change that experience for anything because of my the people that I get to hang out with. They're incredible. Their talent is second to none. So it has to be a win-win for all involved, for all to get excited about it, and for me to continue to be creative about it. I love being creative, and I love making win-win situations. So I don't know if that's a common thread or whatnot, but it seems to be working so far, and I think I'll carry it on forward.
Before we wrap up, Brian, I'm curious, you've had so many adventures. What have you not yet seen or experienced that you're excited about or looking forward to?
Excited about? Well, I don't know.
Or hoping for even.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind experiencing 4-inch hail. So it's I've experienced all the way up to 3.5-inch hail.
Oh, Brian, that's what they all say.
Yeah, 4-inch. Actually, I just added a new hail guard to my vehicle because 4-inch hail, and that's actually one of the biggest worries about being a storm chaser is the huge hail and all of the lightning. It's normally we're not really too worried about the tornado per se. It's always about the huge hail and the barrage of incredible lightning. But and of course we know where the hail core is, which we try to stay out of because we don't want to lose our windshields or our windows, because that's going to put us out of commission for maybe a day or 2 or 3 days. But it would be nice to, get into, under a carport or a car wash sort of bay or something where the vehicles are protected and just experience these monster bombs hitting the ground. Now, I don't know if you've been on the website, you checked. I do have a video on CanadianChaser.com where I'm filming 3-inch hail coming down out of the heavens, and they're firing at you at about 100 to 110 miles an hour, so faster than a pitcher can throw a ball in Major League Baseball. And I got about 20 seconds or 30 seconds of a video there where all of this hail is coming down, and it's only 3-inch hail, and it starts crashing through the windshield, and you can kind of hear me giggling through the whole thing because I'm a huge hail fan. I love hail, and so I'm looking forward to experiencing bigger hail, maybe even 5-inch hail, but under some sort of safety carport or as I said, a car wash bay or something. That'd be amazing. I know.
I'm doing a very unscientific measurement while I'm listening to you talk, holding my fingers apart to what I think might be somewhere around about 4 inches. And yeah. I'm thinking that's not all that much smaller than what a baseball would be. Nope.
No, and that's how we measure it. Yeah, once they get over kind of golf ball size, anything over golf ball size will kill you. Especially if you get hit in the head or the back of the neck or something. With the difference between hail and like your regular ice cube in your domestic refrigerator is there's very little air in hail. It's so dense, and it's very destructive. So if you're on the Google and looking at some images, just punch up there hail damage, and you'll see like hail going through roofs, like through shingle, through a particle core, or plywood. You can see obviously going through windows, through doors, huge holes through siding on the western sides of houses and stuff. It's unbelievable, the destruction from hail. And the biggest hailstone that's ever fallen from the heavens is just over 8 inches, which is something I never want to experience. And I love 3-inch hail, 3.5-inch hail, but I still want to experience 4 to 5-inch hail. And it's not just when hail starts coming down. It's not like one stone, every 10, 20 seconds. When the heavens decide to let go of its hail, basically when the gravity is taking over, the hail gets so big that the updraft can't keep it aloft within the supercell anymore, and gravity wins. It comes down all at once. And so it is a constant barrage. It lasts for about 20 minutes. And the video is unbelievable, but that's what I cannot wait to experience that.
I want to wish you good luck so that you get what you want, but I find myself hesitating when you describe it. But
yeah, it's so wonderful.
Brian, this has really been terrific. I learned so much about you that I didn't know, and I got a lot of deeper insight on some of the things that I have heard you talk about before. But I really appreciate you taking the time to share so openly, and I wish you safe and enjoyable travels, and really look forward to talking to you again. Thanks so much for this.
Thanks, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If you'd like to learn more about Brian and connect with him online, the best place to do that is his website, CanadianChaser.com. It's all one word, CanadianChaser.com. If you'd like to learn more about his business, Streaming Incorporated, you can find that at streaminginc.com. Inc is I-N-C. And he mentioned the Tornado Calendar. That's simply tornadocalendar.com. Of course, I'll have all those links up on the blog post show notes for this episode. It's number 77 at noschedulemanpodcast.com. On social media, look for Brian on Twitter, at Canadian Chaser, same handle on Facebook. If you like this episode, I'm pretty sure you're going to like episode 62 from my friend Unstoppable Tracy Schmidt. It's How to Be Unstoppable. And when I heard about Brian's adventures, I immediately thought of Tracy. I'll just leave it at that. Look up episode 62. You won't be disappointed. Episode 59 also came to mind. It's called You've Got to Go or you'll never know. With Antarctic, Mike Pierce. So Mike is another one that immediately came to mind when I thought of the adventures that Brian has had. What drives a guy who lives in sunny San Diego, California, to want to go all the way to Antarctic and run a marathon in the freezing cold? That's Mike's story, or part of it. Episode 59, if you want to hear that. In episode 58, this was a good cluster of episodes of epic adventure. How Far Would You Go? The story of Jesse's journey with John Davidson, who 20 years ago walked across Canada. Look Canada up on the Google Maps and see how far that is. It was an epic journey. And why did he do that? To raise money and awareness to try to fight Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a disease that ultimately took the life of his son Jesse. But before that happened, John set just an incredible legacy and great example for the rest of us. And he tells that story in episode 58. It's called How Far Would You Go? The story of Jesse's journey. You can find those episodes and all past episodes of this podcast anywhere in the world. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and at noschedulemanpodcast.com. If you'd like to connect with me, I'd love that. Just look for No Schedule Man on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. That's my handle on all those platforms, or visit me at kevinbulmer.com. There you can learn more about my speaking, small business, marketing, and mindset coaching and other content. Make sure to jump on my email list about either personal or professional development, and I'll help you out as best I can from either one of those places. Meantime, I really appreciate you spending this time with me and with Brian. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it helpful, please do subscribe and tell a friend. I hope to have you here again with me next time for the next episode of Journeys with the No Schedule Man.
Just a little deja vu.